You're watching David Nolan, one of the founders of the Libertarian Party, delivering his keynote address Thursday afternoon. This is day 3 of the Libertarian Party National Convention. You're looking at a live shot of the Grand Ballroom at the Chicago Marriott, located on North Michigan Avenue, downtown. There are 408 delegates and alternates who have gathered here in the Windy City. The last time a national convention came here was 1968. The Democratic Party held its presidential nomination convention here. This is the 20th anniversary for the Libertarian Party. Founded in 1971, there are now nearly 300,000 registered party members across the country. 4 years ago, delegates met in Philadelphia and nominated former Republican Congressman Ron Paul, who was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from 1977 until 1985. He was the 1988 presidential candidate for the party. As delegates begin to gather here this afternoon for the nomination, Ron Paul, does this bring back memories of 1987?
It certainly does, but I guess I feel rather relieved that I'm not in the contest this time. But it is exciting.
What can our viewers expect to see as far as the nominating process is concerned? What happened with you in 1987?
Of course, it went rather smoothly for us because we won on the first ballot. Of course, if you don't get the right percentage, if there's more than 2 candidates, you might have several ballots. But in my case, I did win on the first ballot, and it was tense for a moment. It wasn't overwhelming, but we were able to win on the first ballot, and we all found that pretty exciting at the time.
By now, many of our viewers may have heard some of the debates or discussions on the Libertarian Party, but how would you define what the party is and what you stand for?
Well, the party stands for what the name of the party is. It stands for liberty. And of course, many of us have come over the years to believe that the other 2 parties no longer stands for the Constitution and liberty, and that there's no difference between the 2. I mean, whether you have Republicans or Democrats in office, government gets bigger, taxes go up, the deficit gets worse. We can elect even a man like Ronald Reagan, and the deficit's got a lot worse. So we don't see any difference. The Libertarians stand for less government, for individual liberty, get the government off our backs, a more sensible foreign policy, and it's just a lot different than what we're getting in Washington. If people are satisfied with Washington, they don't have to listen to us. They don't even have to come to us, because they're going to get more of the same, whether Bush is president or Dukakis is president, the same thing. So it's really, if the people are unhappy, and I believe sincerely more than half the people in this country do not identify themselves as Republicans or Democrats, and they're unhappy, they're disenchanted, and they're looking for something. So it's up to us as Libertarians to present our program, because when the people hear our program, they respond in a favorable manner.
We should probably tell our viewers there is a lot of last-minute preparation now going on. The afternoon session is expected to begin in about 5 or 6 minutes. This is probably the most important part of the convention, the nomination of the presidential and the vice presidential candidates. You got here yesterday, but do you sense some last-minute politicking now going on in this room?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's probably a great deal of concern for the undecideds, and there's always some who either are truly undecided or never make a public commitment. And quite frankly, the undecided vote may be the swing vote here. So even though each side claims they have victory, I think it's probably still up in the air, and we'll soon find out who the nominee will be.
You mentioned earlier that you were a member of Congress from 1977 until 1985 as a Republican.
Right.
Why did you switch?
Well, it was out of the frustration that government never got smaller. If you look at the Republican platform in 1980 under Ronald Reagan, and the enthusiasm generated in 1980 that something would change, it's awful disappointing to look 3 or 4 or 5 years later and find out that not only did things not get smaller, they got much bigger faster. And we can support this by looking at taxes. You know, they claim taxes went down under Ronald Reagan, but they were raised 6 times under Ronald Reagan as well. And the deficit exploded. The national debt went from less than $1 trillion to over $3 trillion in that decade. Government debt is growing at 13.9% per year. So it's awful frustrating to endorse the same old parties, Republicans and Democrats, and never see significant change. Some would argue, well, Democrats at least stand up for civil liberties and they stand up for a foreign policy of less intervention overseas. But when you look at it, whether Democrats are in charge or Republicans are in charge, personal liberties are intruded upon. We go about the world trying to interfere in the internal affairs of all nations, and we're having eternal conflicts. And it's unlike what our founders intended, unlike what the Constitution said, and unlike our American tradition of minding our own business and letting the people decide what is best for themselves and letting the market work for itself. We really don't have a free enterprise system here. Many libertarians are encouraged very much by what's happening in Eastern Europe, the total rejection of centralized planning. Yet today we read in the newspaper our Secretary of Agriculture deciding how many acres of corn should be planted next year. It's absurd. I mean, in America they're deciding on how many acres of corn to be planted, where in the Soviet Union they reject central planning.
A little bit of noise in the background as they prepare for the afternoon
They must have really
nomination.
liked my statement, huh?
What did you find when you were on the campaign trail?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
What did you find when you were on the campaign trail in 1987 and 88?
Well, I found good receptions when people heard me. The trouble was that there's sort of a monolithic understanding that there's something sacred about a so-called two-party system. Although the two-party system to us is a one-party system, there's never any real chance for the alternatives to get a chance to speak out and to participate. We believe that any candidate who gets on enough ballots where they theoretically could win the presidency ought to be included in all the debates and all the coverage. But here in America, where there's supposed to be free choice, there's less choice. If Americans ever come to the conclusion that there's not much difference between Republicans and Democrats, and they never include alternative choices in the coverage, the Americans really aren't exposed to a true choice. So we really have to fight. When we got our message out, the few times I did get on TV, the response was very, very favorable. I mean, we're very confident that the message of liberty is what the Americans want to hear. And besides, our country's getting poorer. They're going to have to listen to us soon. Just like in the Soviet Union, they had to listen to the non-communists because the communists consumed everything. Well, in this country, the interventionists, the big spenders, the deficit financing is going to finally consume what we have, and they're going to have to listen to the libertarian message, and I think times are more appropriate than ever. I think 1992 is a great year for libertarians. Not only because it's a great message, but because the Republicans and Democrats have messed this country up so badly.
The Chicago Sun-Times calls this a national political convention in a capsule. Would you describe it that way as well?
In a what?
In a capsule.
In a capsule.
In reference to the Democratic and Republican conventions.
I'd like to really take issue. Unfortunately, there is some truth to that. But I think it's part of what I just described, that we don't get the type of coverage. The message is a powerful message. And if the American people ever get a chance, there will no longer be a capsule. We represent a lot of people. If we represent the disenchanted in this country, I think that we're going to see that there's a lot of support. Just think of the movement to limit terms. I mean, that's a strong national movement now. And that's a libertarian type movement. We wished if they couldn't get the message of libertarianism, at least they could allow the states to put on their balanced vote for none of the above, because we're quite convinced that frequently none of the above would be winning these elections rather than the standard Republican and Democrat.
We just received a 30-second warning that the program is about to begin, but in summing up, what are you looking for this afternoon? How would you describe the mood inside this room?
Well, I think one thing that I've noticed at this convention is that there's a lot of cohesiveness. I think regardless of our candidate, I think everybody's going to be unified, everybody's going to get behind the candidate, and I think most people here at this convention are really looking toward a good year. I think conditions are better. There's a lot of people, the disenchanted Republicans, aren't going to support Bush because they figure he's a shoo-in. I think our vote is going to be tremendous this year.
Ron Paul, the 1988 Libertarian Party presidential candidate, we thank you for your time.
Thank you.